Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another video on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I started with the NES game. I chose that to do a video on just because I recently read the book and it's impacted me quite a great deal. And I wanted to, in some way, memorialize that so I could look back and remember that I read this book and how it impacted me. So I decided, why not do a video on it? I suppose the book can't get any worse than the game. Thankfully, the book is so much better than the game. But yeah, I decided to make this video just to maybe give someone an idea of something to read if they're ever bored. Because it's quite a great novel, and it's short too. So if you're ever bored and need something to read, here's a book I recommend, for whatever that's worth. So let's get into it. So if you've seen my last video, but even if you haven't, because that's not really important, Robert Louis Stevenson is the author. The author of this novel. He wrote this in 1886. So he was quite a celebrity in his own time. This was not the first hit that he wrote. Treasure Island was arguably the first. Another great book. Maybe I'll review that one day. So he spent a lot of his life in Edinburgh and then eventually moved to the United States and then eventually to Samoa, where he would die at age 44. He did not live a very long life. Sadly, he was cut short due to some illness that he had. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. So, without further ado, we get into the plot. So, this isn't going to be a comprehensive covering of the plot because that would be unnecessary. It's just going to be a brief overview. That way there's some reason for you to read. I mean, if I tell you everything, then what's the point? So, because of our culture and because of how widely known this book is, a lot of us already know that Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Hyde. But this fact is not actually discovered until the very last chapters of the book. So, since we as a modern audience already know the conclusion, that may take away some of the readability, where we won't want to read it if we already know the conclusion, but it's still a good story. Let's get into it though. So for the plot, Mr. Hyde is known to be a bad character. The first chapter talks about a story that the main character, Mr. Utterson, has with his friend. His friend tells the story of Mr. Hyde, and that basically starts off the book. Mr. Hyde is involved with this guy named Dr. Jekyll, who's a good person. He's respected, and this really intrigues Mr. Utterson. He doesn't understand why this would be the case. Why would a good person be involved with such a bad character? So he investigates the case, and then ultimately, as we know, he finds out that they're actually the same person. That's the basic plot, without getting into all the details. So what's good about this story? Why is it worth reading? I mean, if it's a bad book, no one's going to read it. So there's got to be some reason why we keep coming back to this book as a culture, why we find it so intriguing. There's quite a lot of good with this book. First and foremost, it's very engaging. Some of the classics are a little bit harder for me to get really engaged with, like Dante's Inferno, for instance. That book is just not that engaging. And that's always probably one of the most determining factors if someone is going to continue to come back and read a book even after centuries. Do classics stay classics for bad reasons? Normally not. Normally there's something good about them. In Dante's Inferno, I don't think it's the readability. It just happens to be that the imagery is memorable. Anyway, not talking about that book. This book is very engaging. Every chapter it's quite a page turner. You want to find out what happens next. Even though you already know the conclusion, the book is still interesting because you don't know how they're going to get to that point. It's a very curious matter. You really want to know how they get there. So this book does a great job at telling its story. Secondly, which is always a good thing, it's short and sweet. Who wants to read a book that's ridiculously long? Especially for us, sometimes there are certain stories that aren't worth that many pages. Thankfully, books like Harry Potter, which are significantly longer, some of the it's a series for one, but also some of the individual books are 300, 500 pages long, etc. Harry Potter is an example where if it is longer, it is good, and it is worth that many books in my opinion. But I don't think a story like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is worth much more than already is. So, but it is good that it's short and sweet. You can read it in a few days. You can read it in one day, I suppose, if you were overly ambitious, but you can read it in a few days too. Um, I can't tell you how many times there have been books that have been so long that you know how it is. You read a book and you get busy in your life and you can't read as much as you want to, and then you end up forgetting what happened, so you'd have to start the book all over again if you really wanted to continue because you just don't remember everything that happened. So it's good when it's short, so that way you can finish it faster. Anyway, spent a little bit more time on that point than I had anticipated. The third point is that it has excellent foreshadowing. As we know, for us as a modern audience, we already know the conclusion. But it's always great to see that every chapter there's a hint that maybe Dr. Jekyll is actually Mr. Hyde. It's really interesting how even in the first chapter, it talks about how Mr. Hyde has a check from Dr. Jekyll, which is very curious to the main character, how he acquired that check. They conclude that it's blackmail, but in reality, it wasn't, which is interesting. Fourth point, the subplots are fully handled and finished. Pretty much everything about the story was handled in some way. Dr. Jekyll's motives were fully covered in the last chapter of the book. Because up to that point, even though around chapter 9, I believe, you learned that Dr. Jekyll was Mr. Hyde, and you even probably learned it in chapter 8 too, if you because it was pretty clear that Mr. Hyde was Jekyll. It just wasn't, irrefutably proven yet. But it fully handled, why did Dr. Jekyll do this? What happened on Jekyll's side, but in some of the stories that happened in the book, it tells you how he would turn to Mr. Hyde and do stuff, and then he would come back and turn into Jekyll again. It talks about some of the complications. It talks about pretty much everything from his side, from the main character's side, and that's what's really good about it. Everything is fully covered. And then lastly, it of course has good imagery. We can vividly picture Mr. Hyde, a short, hunched over man that is exceedingly ugly, where Dr. Jekyll is, handsome and beautiful, and tall. Just good imagery. Lastly, we got application. It's one thing if a book is good, but there's got to be some reason why we read it. I mean, isn't that why we study history? What's the point of learning about what we did in the past if we really can't use it? Of course we can use history, and of course we can use good books too. There's got to be something we take away from it. There's about 3 themes that I put that I thought we could reflect on. Do we live a double life? Quite an important question to ask ourselves as we get older and we have professional lives, as well as our friend groups continue to get bigger as we know more people. Or maybe not our friend group per se, but our social circle gets bigger as we know more people. We always need to watch ourselves to make sure we're consistent and we're not fake, because nobody appreciates you lying to them or pretending to be someone you're not. If in your workplace, you're discovered to be, I don't know, maybe behind everyone's back, you're a child predator or something. There's just no way that's gonna fly. You can't just be a good moral person when you go to work, and then just when you go home, you're just a complete monster and do whatever you want. Your bosses, they're not gonna let you continue to work there if you're doing stuff like that. But even if you're not doing, horrible crimes like that, if you're not a child molester, even doing, other simple things like, I don't know, maybe you're a pastor, but you're caught in adultery. It's like that stuff just really speaks against you and speaks against your beliefs. Because if you're a real pastor, you can't act like, like an adulterer. You need to be faithful to your wife, as as the Bible says. So you need to live faithfully, to what you profess. It's going to help you no matter what. Second theme is sin always comes back to bite you. As the old saying goes, kicks have kickbacks. Whenever you do something, you pay the consequences for it, whether it's good or bad. If you study and you make an effort to constantly review your material, you'll probably do good on the test. That's the reward for what you've done. Well, there's also negative rewards. If you sleep with a lot of people, You may end up getting STDs. You may end up getting somebody pregnant. If you steal from people, they may try to kill you. They may try to sue you. They may try to do a host of things to you, but almost none of them are good. You face consequences for what you do. You could go to jail as well for stealing. These things happen in life, and it's important that you learn them sooner rather than later, because we can't always run away from our problems. You know, if in one of the scenarios I mentioned before, if you get somebody pregnant, yeah, you could just run away and pretend like it's not going to affect you. If you're a man, that is, because men are normally the ones that leave. Um, it's really a lie, because that just doesn't happen. When you leave, there's consequences. Um, her family, her friends will not like you because that's not the right thing to do. You have a person that could potentially grow up and not like you, and it's not good. So in total, bad actions have bad consequences. So always keep that in mind. Lastly, the struggle between our good self and our bad self. Um, no one needs to tell you that sometimes it's hard to do the right thing, because frequently it's easy to do what is bad, because it doesn't take a lot of effort. You know, I know that normally, it's a good idea to, not to get revenge on people, to always be forgiving, and to, always look out for other people's interests other than my own. But as everyone knows, sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes in life people take advantage of us. Sometimes in life, sometimes we think people don't deserve our forgiveness. What about a person that, I'm their husband and they cheated on me? Do they deserve my forgiveness? Um, it's like, difficult situations and difficult people always make this harder to be good and do what's right. It's like, yeah, I should forgive my husband for cheating. I mean, that doesn't mean it's easy though, at all. And some people may never forgive their husband if they've cheated on them, or their wife if it's the reverse. It's hard to do the right thing sometimes. And not even an example like that where one side has blatantly done something wrong. Um, let's say there's someone in need and we want to donate money to them. But it's our money and we don't have a whole lot, so we don't want to give it away. We want to keep it to ourselves. Um, I'm not morally obligated to, I don't have to give someone what I've earned if I've earned it. But it's still the right thing to do. I mean, just because I don't have to doesn't mean I shouldn't. Sometimes it's not always easy. And the application for us is that we need to be aware of this struggle. Most people, when they wake up, they want to do the right thing. They want to achieve their goals. But the problem is that frequently our evil nature gets in the way. We want to do what's pleasing. We want to do what's easy. Do I want to take the time to learn a foreign language? No, I want to sit in bed and watch TV instead, or play video games, because it's easier. Well, if we don't keep that laziness in check, we'll never learn a foreign language or do whatever else we want to do. So we always need to keep in mind that we have this nature of warring against, because if we don't know that we are warring against it, then we'll never truly conquer it. That's pretty much it. That's what I think we can learn from this book. There's probably more that we can learn, but that's just some of the basics. And these are always good reminders to hear. So that's it for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm finally done with this series. Talked about the game, talked about the book. I'm not going to talk about the movies, at least not for now. That's pretty much all I have to say. So thank you for watching. Now that I've finished this whole topic of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I can finally put it down and get to something else I really like. Other than book reviews, which I plan to do more of, I also want to do game playthroughs, because just like books have influenced me, so have games. There's quite a few games that have really, sparked some creativity in my life, helped me to learn more about certain historical things, etc. They just have greatly influenced me. And so, I'm on to play through some of them on my channel, just because I really like them, and it's fun to do that. And maybe someone who's never seen these games will also find something in them that they love, and that they can learn something from it. So, thank you for watching. Look forward to that soon if you're interested. Have a great day, and be blessed.